Moscow is the biggest city in Russia. More than 20 million people walk its streets. Massive Soviet landmarks, wide avenues built for parades and power, the old heart of the Soviet Union, the big capital. Even with all that, most Russian people say Moscow is not Russia. Moscow can feel like a kind of make-believe place, a place where money is spent extravagantly, to show, to impress, to stand out. It's a place where lots of different realities collide. This is the city where a huge share of the country's resources are concentrated. And it shows. Everything here feels polished. The grass is trimmed, the trees are healthy, the streets are spotless. You can almost feel the money in the air. But Moscow is enormous. And like any other city of this scale, there are many different ways of living here. It's not all luxury and futuristic urbanism. Aside from the mix of modern architecture and old Soviet buildings, there's a more conservative part of the city, which we will get to explore later. It was the beginning of September, and we got to visit the sunny and warm Moscow, the third Russian city in a row in which we experienced an amazing weather. Our lucky strike kept going, but it wouldn't last that long. This trip was smooth and easy. We fell asleep in St. Petersburg and woke up in Moscow, with a train still a train, and we were carrying the weight of long days spent walking through different cities. We exited Leningradsky station to find ourselves in a massive place full of activity, the square of the three stations. Then we decided to check the box right away and visit the most touristic place in the city, but there was a slight inconvenience. The Kremlin was closed. I didn't find that too bothering though. From 1 minute to the next, I was surrounded by history. Right at the entrance, coming from the metro station, you find the State Historical Museum. On the right, the Kremlin's wall, and on the left, the GUM, a luxury mall center. Yeah, I know, it's kind of ironic. At the very end of the Red Square walk, there's St. Basil's Cathedral, a really beautiful church. So beautiful, in fact. Ivan the Terrible blinded its architects so they couldn't recreate such a masterpiece ever again. Crossing the Red Square made me think of all the times I saw this place on news reports and in movies. It felt surreal to be there. Moscow is a name I've heard over and over my entire life, but for some reason, it was a place I never had thought I'd actually visit. Moscow is built like an onion. It grew in circles. Back in the day, these streets were protected by massive defensive walls. The first circle was the Kremlin, then came the White City walls, and finally the Garden Ring. Walking these streets, you'll see businessmen, luxury cars, and perfect neoclassical buildings. Today, the closer you are to that original center, the more insane the prices get. In fact, for a long time, Moscow had the highest concentration of billionaires in the world. Even today, it still ranks right at the top, alongside New York and Hong Kong. By the end of the day, I started to notice something was off. Anya had been coughing since we arrived. And even though she was trying to hide it, I could tell she was pushing herself way too hard for my sake. I was worried she was reaching her limit. After being in Kazan and St. Petersburg, Moscow was the last city on our list. I started thinking about the reality of her getting sick. I didn't want to leave her alone, but even if I did, I didn't know how I'd move around the city without her. In the 30 minutes it took us to get to our hotel, Anya's defenses finally crashed. She was done. So they too started with the change of plans. She needed to stay back and recover, and didn't want me sitting in a hotel room with her, so she forced me to go out. So I was alone in Moscow. I don't speak the language, I can't read the signs, and I didn't have much of a plan. But then, the day took a turn. I wasn't going to be alone after all. I was meeting up with a man who grew up in the wild 90s. A businessman, a people's person, and family man. Sasha Petrov, Anya's dad. This four-building complex was built for the 1980s Olympics. At the time, it was the largest hotel in the world, and it hosted athletes, journalists, and anyone the Soviet Union wanted to impress during the games. It is a massive concrete relic of the Soviet era that's still active, and as of today, it's the biggest hotel in Europe. But these buildings aren't the relics we were looking for. The place we were headed to was filled with memories from those times.
Из Барселоны снимают фильм о России.
This is Izmailova, the city's old market. Just another of the many faces of Moscow. Sasha brought me here for a different perspective, far from the polished urbanism and the luxury of the center. This is a more real side of the city. Different kinds of people visit this place. Local babushkas looking for new scarves or clothes. Tourists, like me, in the look of the perfect souvenir to bring back home. But it's not only the right place to find these kind of things. It goes much farther than that. Here, you can see the remains of the Soviet era and take home with you pieces of history. There's elder vendors who lived through the Soviet times, selling away their memories. And also specialized collectors who sell Soviet antiquities. Pins, army medals, art, old cigarette packs, and even bullet shells and old grenades, most made in the USSR.
Esta área de souvenir.
Да.
А esta área old market. Antiguanas. It's original.
Yes.
And osa. See?
Sí, oso. Izmailova is like a gate to the past, a place where different generations collide. Elder people whose lives were turned upside down overnight by perestroika, some who cherish the Soviet times, some who want to forget them. And then you have the Generation Pepsi. These are the people from Sasha's age. They grew up during the Likhie 90, the wild 90s, when mothers didn't know if their children would make it back home from school. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it left a massive power vacuum. Gangs didn't officially run the country, but they held the power in the streets. There was no real law. You just had to be tough to survive. Back in the 70s, during the Soviet era, the USSR traded vodka for Pepsi syrup. It was the first Western brand to break through the Iron Wall. Kids born around that time were later named as the Pepsi generation, a symbol for the cultural, political, and social shift. A generation that grew up during the transition from the Soviet system into the outside world. Looking for a gift to bring to my dad, we stumbled upon this little stand run by an elder couple.
Oh, Salvador Dali.
They had a huge collection of old propaganda and all kinds of posters from the Soviet Union. The same posters they used to see everywhere when growing up, that have now become remains of a country that no longer exists.
Esta 5 euros.
Some people would be terrified of spending a whole day with their father-in-law. Even more so if they can speak the same language, and even more if they're in a country where no one speaks theirs. But I already knew Sasha. Some of you might remember him from the Kazan Kremlin tour. While it's true I hadn't spent that much time alone with him before, I knew from the beginning it was going to be a great day. I didn't pass his strength test though. I'd never swung a kettlebell before, and maybe a frontal elevation wasn't the right move with 32 kilos.
No?
Then he showed me how these are supposed to be handled, and displayed the exaggerated strength of a Russian dad. Gatekeeping is not good, so he later would reveal the secret to the Russian man's strength. Shashlik, the Russian barbecue, big meat chunks impaled in swords and grilled. We had it with plov and bread, and man, after some hours of walking, it's the perfect meal to recover energy. Izmailova is a place that you can't miss if you're visiting Moscow. Whether you want a Soviet pin, a propaganda poster, or even an aircraft pilot suit, walking this market is the best way to see the real history of this country. And to understand that Moscow isn't just shiny cars and fancy buildings. Of course, this was a great opportunity to bond with Sasha. I'll be eternally thankful to him for taking me on this excursion and for the effort he put in trying to communicate with me.
In Moscow, normal, julio, agosto, not September.
Despite not fully speaking English or Spanish, he found a way to dissolve the language barrier, and I had a great time with him. I also take the experience of being in such a massive city. I can't start to imagine how many people live in just the buildings we're seeing in the background. It is a place of constant movement, kilometers and kilometers of roads filled with cars flowing at any hour. Power plants next to neighborhoods, which are needed to feed the huge infrastructure of the city. New buildings built to home thousands of people in each of them. The renaissance of the classic Panelki. Would you be able to live in a city like Moscow? Some part of me tells me I would like it. Growing up, I used to idealize living in big cities. I feel, like many of us, I yelled at cities like New York, Paris, or London, thinking one day I would get to live there and life would be great. As an adult, that idealization crumbled. I live in Barcelona, and I need to escape from time to time to stay sane. Even living in such a small place like that one feels exclusive to me. I think Moscow is the biggest city I've ever been to. The ambience is fierce. It is a place that will eat you alive if you let it. A city of unspoken expectations, where you don't just show up, you earn your place. A massive, indifferent machine, where it's easy to disappear into the swarm. But for some people, that pressure is the point. The ones who work the most achieve a special spot in the anthill. Only the hungriest, the ones who are willing to sacrifice everything to get to the top. Sleep, time, the idea of a normal life. If you're willing to leave it all behind, there's a chance you can make it there. In exchange, you get a position, a status, a kind of power most people will never touch. These are the guys no one knows about, the guys that are invisible. Moscow built them a place of their own, an oasis for business where money is made out of thin air. A place where the line between work and life simply disappears. This is just one part of the ecosystem that maintains the city's luxury.
Станция Москва-Сити. Платформа слева. Переход на станцию метро.
The Soviet Union had just collapsed, and Moscow was starting from scratch. An abandoned quarry on the edge of the city turned out to be the perfect spot for Russia to plant a bold statement in. In 1992, construction on Moscow City began. Russia was ready to play the new game. Through the next years, the place became an isle of modern skyscrapers, huge and luxurious capitalist symbols, contrasting with the Soviet soul of the city. This became Moscow's financial district. Banks, law firms, corporate headquarters, this is the kind of place where everything runs behind an NDA. And as capitalistic as it is, whoever has the money to establish here is welcomed. There are businesses making millions here that most people will never hear about. 60, 70, 80 hours weeks. The people who work here don't have a regular 9 to 5. Money sets a schedule, a perfect environment for the ones who want to be their own boss. I was really glad Anya was feeling better and she could join me to visit Moscow City. It's not all about business here, at least not anymore. The district has become a massive attraction. The place is stunning, and there's no discussion about it. There's hotels, restaurants, a mall. It has become a place people come to hang out. People even live here. For $8,000 a month, you get a 2-bedroom apartment, enough for a simple life. But the experience of walking the most futuristic district of Moscow is already worth to come visit. To be surrounded by buildings this tall for the first time, it felt like being inside a movie, something between unsettling and amazement. For the ones like me just passing through, it's beautiful, impressive, a whole experience. For the ones who live for the hassle, I guess it must be an inspiring place to visit. Would you be willing to sacrifice all that it takes to be at the very top? And what could possibly be worth that much? This might be a part of the answer. The Moscow millionaire lifestyle everybody talks about.
This complex, Diaz Años, very best Russo architect. Diaz Años, este proyecto.
Turns out, Giuseppe Acevillo is amongst the names of the renowned architects who designed this complex. He had also worked in Kazan, and he was the former chief architect of Barcelona. I didn't see that coming.
20 building y uno lake, un school, niños, pequeños.
Guardería.
Sí, y está completo. Not close. In Kazan, all best building close. Esta vista, all people.
The entry point to Vai is a 77 square meter 1-bedroom apartment, starting at 190 million rubles. That's around 2.1 million euros. Congratulations, you've got the job, the apartment. Now, it's time for you to make new friends and show you're one of the cool kids. But try to avoid what happened to us. Remember to make a quick stop by Prada before showing up. Otherwise, it might become a little bit difficult to fit in. We didn't dress up for the occasion, and I ended up feeling like a Viking arriving to a village. Like we crashed into a party we weren't invited to. But sometimes attitude gets you farther than looks.
Garon esta chef, nueva new carta y presentation.
Sasha just knew exactly how to handle the situation. He wanted me to have a grasp of this reality. For me to see what a day in the life of the Moscow high class looks like. I was so out of place, but in a matter of seconds, Sasha was presenting himself, talking with people, and getting some insights on kitchen equipment, his line of work. Meanwhile, I was observing. the place, the people, the kind of event we were in. A brunch in a specialty coffee shop, taking place just in the street of one of the most wealthy neighborhoods of Moscow. People wearing expensive clothes, buying expensive coffee, showing off and spending a great sunny day among successful equals. If you're going to pursue this lifestyle, you better know where to get your avocados from. Usachevsky is a classic market with a twist of modernity. A place where you can find fresh produce of the best quality, and restaurants with cuisines from all over the world. Getting certain ingredients in Russia is not straightforward. Some products have to travel all the way from Latin America or Central Asia to get here, which makes them pricier and sometimes hard to find at all. But Usachevsky is one of those places in Russia where you can find practically anything. Even products from brands that left Russia a while ago, imported from countries such as Kazakhstan and so on. And of course, Russian products such as caviar and fresh salmon. Everything was cool. We were exploring the market, I was taking some shots until... Again, I would get to spend some hours with Sasha while Anya and her mom were at the theater.
Very best Russian music esta. Numero uno 10 años ago. In a all discoteca. Phone never sleep. Esta copy Park Ciutadella is not grande atracciones. Esta barrio relax.
I refused to leave Moscow without visiting Gorky Park. It did remind me of Citadella, but it looked much, much bigger. A huge park where you can rest from the busy rhythm of the city. This was my last day in Moscow, and Sasha would take me on a stroll that would help me get a better look at the whole picture. In Moscow, there's also local people, born and raised in the city, aside from the millionaires, people like you and me, with normal hobbies and aspirations.
In Soviet Union, chess is very popular game, very, very popular. 10 champions in the world, in the Russian people. 10 años. Dos personas, Mr. Karpov y Mr. Kasparov. 10 años, Karpov, Kasparov, Karpov, Kasparov. Russo.
You don't need to go to the outskirts of the city to find more relatable stories. Moscow is amongst the 20 biggest cities in the world, and as of today, it is the largest city entirely in Europe. I'm sure I would need a couple more days to explore it properly.
Ice hockey shoes. Esta primera modelo mía.
To get a better understanding of how things really work there, I know I must have missed a lot of places, so if you know the city, drop me a comment telling me where I should go to whenever I'm back there. I would really appreciate it. Sasha had his own must-see spots of the city. One he made sure I didn't miss was this wall dedicated to Viktor Tsoi, a very special cultural symbol for him as well as the whole country. He was the singer of the band Pinot. Their music represented the hunger for freedom, and they became the voice of a generation. Tsoi tragically died in a car accident at the peak of his career. When we went to the theater to wait for Anya and her mom, we found these people celebrating what they thought it was a cultural event. I remember thinking this was a great representation of the cultural diversity of a big city. But looking back at it, I'm not that sure this was what I thought it was. So if you know what that celebration is about, please let me know in the comments. I forgot to mention the theater Anya and her mom were going to was no other than the Bolshoi Theater of Moscow, a huge representative building that's even printed in the 100 rubles bill. This was the end of the day for us. Our Moscow adventure would finish and we would go back to Kazan to spend some days before returning to Barcelona. Moscow is a city I love to visit, the biggest one so far, and it helped me understand that although there's something that attracts me about disappearing into a giant city, I am not comfortable being a part of the anthill. But I find spending some days in cities like this is enough for me to grasp the excitement of living in them, maybe without the problems and the hassles of it. For most Russian people, Moscow feels like an alternate reality, a curated world of its own, a place full of resources and investment that aims to be the face of Russia, but fails to represent the reality of the rest of the country. In essence, it still is a metropolis with a bunch of different stories, and apart from what we've seen, there's more relatable sides of it. People come to Moscow from all over Russia looking for opportunities, study, work, live a better life in the heart of the country. Overall, I think Moscow is a really impressive city, a beautiful place that won't leave you indifferent, and I really hope to go back someday. Thank you for watching until the end. If you like this video, you can support me by dropping a like and commenting your thoughts below. As always, I'll be reading. And don't forget to subscribe, it will help me keep making more videos like this one. This is the last of my videos about Russia for a while, but if you enjoyed it, you might want to check this next.